The morning mist clung to the Afghan mountains like a wet blanket as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his night vision goggles one final time. The SEAL team had been moving through the treacherous terrain for 6 hours, their boots finding purchase on loose shale and weathered rock faces that seemed to crumble with each step. Rodriguez could feel the familiar weight of his M4 carbine against his chest, the weapon's familiar bulk a source of comfort in the pre-dawn darkness. Behind him, 7 other operators moved like ghosts through the mountain passes. Petty Officer Jake Thompson carried the team's communications gear, his radio crackling occasionally with static-filled updates from base. Sergeant Mike Chun handled demolitions, his pack loaded with enough C4 to level a small building. The rest of the team consisted of seasoned warriors, each man a specialist in his own right, each one handpicked for this particular mission. Their target was a high-value individual known only as the Engineer, a Taliban bombmaker responsible for dozens of roadside explosions that had claimed the lives of American and coalition forces. Intelligence reports placed him in a compound roughly 12 kilometers from their current position, hidden in a valley that local insurgents had turned into a fortress. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: infiltrate, capture, or eliminate the target, and extract before dawn broke over the mountains. Rodriguez checked his GPS unit and held up his fist, signaling the team to halt. They were approaching a narrow ridge that would give them their first clear view of the target area. The team automatically spread into defensive positions, each man covering a different sector as Rodriguez low-crawled to the edge of the ridge and pulled out his spotting scope. What he saw through the scope made his blood run cold. The valley below was not the quiet mountain village their intelligence had described. Instead, it buzzed with activity even in the pre-dawn hours. Armed figures moved between buildings, vehicles were positioned strategically around the compound, and, worst of all, Rodriguez could see the distinctive shape of heavy machine gun emplacements that hadn't appeared in any of their briefing materials. "Thompson, get on the radio," Rodriguez whispered, sliding back from the ridge. "We need to update base on what we're seeing here." Thompson nodded and began working his radio equipment, but instead of the clear communication they expected, all they received was static. He tried different frequencies, adjusted antennas, and even attempted to reach other units in the area. Nothing. They were completely cut off from outside support. Chin crawled over to where Rodriguez was studying his map. "Something's not right about this whole setup," he said quietly. The intel was way off. There's at least 50 fighters down there, maybe more. Rodriguez knew Chin was right. Everything about this mission felt wrong. The intelligence had been too clean, too simple. Real operations were never this straightforward, especially not in this part of Afghanistan where every valley could hide an army of insurgents. "We're pulling back," Rodriguez decided. "This is beyond our capacity. We'll establish an observation post and call for air support once we get communications back." But as the team began to move away from the ridge, the distinctive crack of rifle fire echoed through the mountains. Dirt exploded near Thompson's position, and suddenly, the quiet morning erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes bloomed like deadly flowers from multiple positions around the valley, and the SEALs realized they had walked into something far worse than a simple capture mission. "Contact! Contact!" Rodriguez shouted into his radio, knowing the calls weren't getting through, but hoping against hope that someone might hear them. "Multiple enemy positions. We're taking heavy fire." The team immediately went into their combat formation, each man finding whatever cover the rocky terrain could provide. But the mountain ridge that had given them such a good view of the valley below had now become a trap. They were exposed on 3 sides, with enemy fighters approaching from multiple directions. Bullets whined off the rocks around them, sending sharp fragments of stone flying through the air. Rodriguez could hear the distinctive sound of AK-47 fire mixed with heavier machine gun bursts. The enemy had been waiting for them, he realized. This had been a trap from the beginning. "How many are we looking at?" Chin called out between bursts of return fire. "Too many," Rodriguez replied, peering around a boulder to get a better look at their situation. "I count at least 20 fighters, probably more moving up behind us." Thompson was still working frantically with his radio, but the jamming was too strong. Someone had cut off their communications deliberately, isolating them in these mountains without any way to call for help. The nearest friendly forces were at least 20 kilometers away, and even if they could somehow get word out, help wouldn't arrive in time. The fire was getting heavier now, more coordinated. Rodriguez could tell these weren't just local fighters taking potshots at American forces. These men were trained, disciplined, and they were executing a well-planned ambush. The SEALs had walked straight into a kill zone. Rodriguez, Sergeant Bill Watson, called out from behind a cluster of rocks. "We've got movement on the eastern approach. At least 10 more fighters coming up that trail." Rodriguez felt his heart sink. The eastern approach was supposed to be their escape route. With enemy forces cutting off that avenue, they were effectively surrounded on a mountain ridge with limited ammunition and no way to call for help. The team sniper, Petty Officer David Park, had set up behind a larger boulder and was picking his targets carefully. Each shot from his rifle dropped an enemy fighter, but for every one he eliminated, 2 more seemed to take their place. They were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "We need to move," Rodriguez decided. "This position is untenable. We'll bound back toward that cluster of rocks about 50 meters behind us." The movement required perfect timing and trust. Half the team would provide covering fire while the other half moved, then they would switch roles. It was a basic military maneuver, but executing it under heavy fire on unfamiliar terrain was anything but simple. "On my mark," Rodriguez called out. Chun, Watson, Park, and Morrison provide cover. Everyone else moves on 3. 1, 2, 3. The covering team opened up with everything they had, sending a wall of bullets toward the enemy positions. Rodriguez, Thompson, and 2 other operators sprinted across the open ground, their boots sliding on loose rocks as bullets cracked past their heads. They made it to the new position, but barely. One of the operators, Petty Officer Sam Morrison, took a round through his shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the rocks. Rodriguez immediately went to work on Morrison's wound, applying pressure while trying to assess the damage. It went clean through. Morrison gasped, his face pale but determined. "I can still fight." Rodriguez knew Morrison was trying to put on a brave face, but the wound was serious. Blood was seeping through the bandage despite the pressure, and Morrison's left arm was essentially useless. They were down 1 effective operator, and the enemy was still closing in. "Second group move," Rodriguez called out, and the remaining 4 operators bounded back to their position under covering fire from the first group. But as they settled into their new defensive position, Rodriguez realized their situation had only gotten worse. The enemy had used the time during their movement to advance closer, and now they were taking fire from multiple directions. The rocky terrain that provided some cover also limited their fields of fire, meaning the enemy could get close without exposing themselves to return fire. Park was still working his sniper rifle, but even his precision shooting couldn't stem the tide of attackers. "I'm down to my last magazine," he called out. "After this, I'll have to switch to my sidearm." The rest of the team was running low on ammunition as well. They had planned for a quick strike mission, not a prolonged firefight against superior numbers. Each man carried enough ammunition for the expected duration of their mission, but they were burning through it rapidly in the intense firefight. "Thompson, any luck with that radio?" Rodriguez asked desperately. "Negative," Thompson replied, sweat streaming down his face despite the cool mountain air. "Whatever they're using to jam us is military grade. I can't get anything through." Rodriguez made a quick calculation in his head. They had been in contact for nearly 20 minutes, and the enemy was getting closer with each passing moment. His men were running low on ammunition, one was wounded, and they had no way to call for help. In his years as a SEAL, he had been in difficult situations before, but never anything quite like this. The enemy fighters were calling to each other in Pashto, coordinating their advance. Rodriguez couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the confidence in their voices. They knew they had the Americans trapped, and they were moving in for the kill. "We need a miracle," Chin said quietly, reloading his rifle with one of his last magazines. Rodriguez was about to respond when a single gunshot echoed across the valley, different from all the others. It was the sharp crack of a high-powered rifle, fire from somewhere high above their position. One of the advancing enemy fighters suddenly dropped his AK-47 clattering across the rocks. The SEALs looked at each other in confusion. None of them had fired that shot, and it had come from a completely different direction than their position. Someone else was on the mountain, someone with a very good rifle and excellent marksmanship skills. Another shot rang out, and another enemy fighter fell. Then another. The advancing insurgents began to show confusion and fear, looking around desperately to identify this new threat that was picking them off one by one. "Who the hell is that?" Thompson whispered. Rodriguez scanned the higher elevations with his scope, trying to locate the source of the shots. Whoever was up there was well hidden and highly skilled. Each shot was finding its mark with deadly precision, and the mysterious sniper was targeting the enemy fighters who posed the greatest threat to the trapped SEAL team. The tide of the battle was beginning to shift, but Rodriguez knew they weren't out of danger yet. The enemy still outnumbered them significantly, and they were still trapped on the mountain ridge with limited ammunition and a wounded teammate. But for the first time since the firefight began, they had a glimmer of hope. The mysterious sniper continued to work, each shot carefully placed and devastatingly effective. Rodriguez counted at least 6 enemy fighters down, and the rest were beginning to seek better cover rather than advancing aggressively. The coordinated attack was beginning to fall apart as the insurgents dealt with this unexpected threat from above. "Whoever you are," Rodriguez whispered to himself, scanning the ridgelines above them, "keep shooting." But even as the immediate pressure began to ease slightly, Rodriguez knew their situation remained desperate. They were still surrounded, still cut off from communication with base, and still running dangerously low on ammunition. The mysterious sniper had bought them some time, but Rodriguez wasn't sure it would be enough to save them. The morning sun was beginning to rise over the Afghan mountains, burning away the mist and revealing the full scope of their predicament. In the growing light, Rodriguez could see enemy fighters repositioning themselves, trying to locate the sniper while maintaining pressure on the SEAL team. The battle was far from over, and Rodriguez wondered if any of them would live to see another sunset. As if reading his thoughts, Morrison looked up from where he was applying a fresh bandage to his shoulder wound. Despite his injury and the blood loss, his eyes still held the determination that marked him as a SEAL. "We've been in worse spots," he said with a weak grin. Rodriguez wasn't sure that was true, but he appreciated Morrison's attempt to maintain morale. As the leader of this team, he had to find a way to get his men home alive. The mysterious sniper had given them a fighting chance, but it would be up to Rodriguez to figure out how to use that opportunity. The battle for survival in the Afghan mountains was just beginning, and Rodriguez knew that every decision he made in the next few hours would determine whether his team lived or died in this remote kill zone. The mysterious sniper's intervention had created a temporary lull in the fighting, but Rodriguez knew it wouldn't last long. He used the precious moments to assess their tactical situation more carefully. Through his scope, he could see that the enemy fighters were regrouping, using the rocky outcroppings and small caves dotting the mountainside for cover as they try to locate their new threat. "Park, what's your assessment of that shooter?" Rodriguez asked the team's sniper. Park had been studying the trajectory of the shots and the positions where the enemy fighters had fallen. "Professional," he said without hesitation. "Range is probably 800 to 1,000 meters, shooting from elevation. Clean kills, no wasted shots. This isn't some local fighter with his grandfather's rifle." The implications of Park's analysis weren't lost on Rodriguez. A shooter of that caliber operating in this remote area meant either special operations forces were in the vicinity, or they had stumbled into something much larger than their original mission parameters had indicated. Thompson had managed to rig an emergency antenna and was still trying to break through the communication jamming. "I'm getting fragments," he reported. "Someone's definitely running sophisticated jamming equipment, but I might be able to punch through with a concentrated burst transmission." "Do it," Rodriguez ordered. "Send our coordinates and situation report. Tell them we're in contact with unknown friendly sniper support." As Thompson worked his radio magic, Rodriguez turned his attention back to their immediate tactical problems. Morrison's shoulder wound was stable, but still bleeding, and the SEAL medic had done what he could with field dressings. They needed to get him to proper medical care, but that seemed increasingly unlikely given their current circumstances. The enemy had adapted to the sniper threat by moving in smaller groups, and using better cover, but they were still advancing. Rodriguez could see at least 15 fighters working their way up the mountainside, approaching from 3 different directions. The mysterious sniper was still picking off targets of opportunity, but couldn't cover all the approaches simultaneously. Movement on the north face, Sergeant Watson called out. 4 fighters, using that gully for concealment. Rodriguez shifted his position to get a better view. The gully Watson had spotted provided excellent cover from their current position, and the enemy fighters were using it to get within grenade range. If they got close enough to start throwing explosives, the SEALs' defensive position would become untenable. "Chun, can you put some 40 Mike down that gully?" Rodriguez asked, referring to the team's grenade launcher. Chun shouldered his M203 and studied the terrain. "Negative on direct fire, but I might be able to bounce one off that rock face and get it to airburst over their position." "Do it." The grenade launcher made its distinctive thunk sound as Chun fired. The 40mm round arced through the air and exploded against the rock wall above the gully, sending deadly fragments raining down on the advancing fighters. The explosion was followed by screams and the sound of men scrambling for better cover. But Chen's success drew immediate attention from other enemy positions. Heavy machine gun fire began raking their position, forcing all the SEALs to hunker down behind their rocky cover. The bullets were coming so close that Rodriguez could feel the shock waves as they passed overhead. "We can't stay here much longer," Rodriguez realized. The enemy was gradually tightening the noose, and once they got close enough to use grenades effectively, the SEAL team would be finished. That's when the radio crackled to life with the first clear transmission they had received since the fighting started. "Bravo 6, this is Overwatch. Do you copy?" Thompson grabbed his handset immediately. "Overwatch, this is Bravo 6. We copy. Where have you been?" "Bravo 6, we've been monitoring your situation. We have assets in your area providing support. Can you identify your position for extraction?" Rodriguez felt a surge of hope. Someone was finally talking to them, and they had assets in the area. But he also felt a nagging suspicion about the timing of this communication. "Overwatch, we're on the eastern ridge, approximately 2 clicks from target building. We have 1 wounded and are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. What assets do you have available?" "Bravo 6, we have rotary wing assets approximately 15 minutes out. Can you move to the landing zone we briefed?" Rodriguez looked at their current position and the enemy fighters still advancing on their location. The brief landing zone was over 1 kilometer away, across terrain that was now crawling with hostile forces. Moving a wounded man that distance under fire would be nearly impossible. "Overwatch, negative on movement to primary LZ. We're pinned down and have wounded. We need close air support before we can move." There was a long pause before the radio crackled again. "Bravo 6, negative on close air support at this time. Political restrictions prevent engagement without positive identification of targets. You need to move to extraction point." Rodriguez felt his heart sink. Political restrictions were nothing new in Afghanistan, but they had never felt more frustrating than right now. The enemy fighters trying to kill his team apparently didn't count as positive enough identification for air support. "Overwatch, we have a friendly sniper providing support from unknown position. Are these your assets?" Another pause. "Bravo 6, we show no friendly snipers in your area. Unknown contact should be considered potentially hostile." Rodriguez exchanged glances with his team. The sniper who had been keeping them alive was apparently not part of whatever official operation was supposed to be supporting them. That raised serious questions about who was helping them and why. Before Rodriguez could respond to the radio call, the mysterious sniper spoke for himself. Another shot rang out across the valley, and Rodriguez saw through his scope as an enemy fighter who had been setting up a rocket-propelled grenade launcher suddenly crumpled behind his weapon. "I don't care who he is," Morrison said through gritted teeth. "He's keeping us alive." Park had been studying the enemy positions and had identified the most immediate threats. "We've got problems coming from multiple directions," he reported. "The sniper is doing good work, but he can't cover everything. We've got fighters moving up the south approach that will be in grenade range in about 10 minutes. Rodriguez made a quick tactical decision. They couldn't stay where they were, but They also couldn't make it to the official extraction point. They needed to find a defensive position that would be easier to hold until help arrived, or until they could figure out their next move. "There's a small plateau about 300 meters to our west," Rodriguez said, studying his map. "Better fields of fire, more defensible. We'll bound back there in teams." "What about our guardian angel up there?" Chun asked, gesturing toward the high ridges where the mysterious sniper was operating. "He'll have to adapt," Rodriguez replied. "We can't coordinate with him, so we'll have to trust he'll figure out what we're doing." The movement to the plateau would be dangerous and expose them to enemy fire, but staying in their current position meant certain death. Rodriguez organized his team for the tactical withdrawal, ensuring that Morrison could be moved safely despite his wound. "First team moves in 30 seconds, Rodriguez announced. "Chun, Watson, and Thompson. Park, and I will provide cover with Morrison and the other two operators." As the first team prepared to move, the mysterious sniper seemed to anticipate their plan. A series of rapid, precise shots began picking off enemy fighters who had good angles on the planned movement route. It was as if the unknown marksman could read Rodriguez's tactical intentions. "Move!" Rodriguez called out. The first team sprinted across the open ground while Rodriguez and Parr provided covering fire. The mysterious sniper continued his deadly work, eliminating threats that the SEALs couldn't even see from their position. The coordination was uncanny, as if they were working with someone who had been part of their team for years. Chun, Watson, and Thompson made it to the plateau safely and immediately began setting up defensive positions. Now it was time for the second team to move, including the wounded Morrison. "Can you make the run?" Rodriguez asked Morrison. Morrison's face was pale from blood loss, but his jaw was set with determination. "I'll make it," he said simply. Rodriguez knew that moving Morrison would slow them down and make them more vulnerable, but they couldn't leave him behind. In the SEALs, no one got left behind, regardless of the circumstances. "Park, you help Morrison. I'll provide rear guard," Rodriguez decided. The second movement went less smoothly than the first. Morrison stumbled halfway across the open ground, and enemy fighters who had repositioned during the first movement opened up with concentrated fire. Bullets kicked up dust all around them as Park half-carried Morrison toward the plateau. Rodriguez laid down suppressing fire, but he could see that enemy fighters were getting closer. One insurgent with an RPG had managed to work his way to within range of the plateau, and Rodriguez watched in horror as the man shouldered his weapon and took aim at his teammates. The RPG fighter was just about to pull the trigger when a bullet from the mysterious sniper took off the top of his head. The rocket-propelled grenade fired harmlessly into the air, exploding against the mountain face well above the SEAL's position. Rodriguez made it to the plateau and immediately began assessing their new defensive position. It was better than where they had been, with good fields of fire in multiple directions and solid rock cover. But they were still surrounded, still running low on ammunition, and still had a wounded teammate who needed medical attention. "Thompson, any luck raising headquarters on that radio?" Rodriguez asked. "Intermittent contact," Thompson replied. "The jamming is getting stronger, but I think I can get short messages through. Send our new coordinates and tell them we're still in heavy contact. Emphasize that we have unknown friendly providing sniper support." As Thompson worked his radio, Rodriguez studied the enemy positions through his scope. The insurgents had taken casualties from the mysterious sniper, but they were still maintaining pressure. If anything, they seemed more determined than ever to eliminate the SEAL team. That's when Rodriguez noticed something that made his blood run cold. Through his scope, he could see enemy fighters setting up what looked like a mortar position in the valley below. If they got that weapon operational, they could rain high-explosive rounds down on the plateau, regardless of the cover the SEALs had found. "Park, you see that mortar position they're setting up?" Rodriguez asked. Park swung his rifle toward the valley and acquired the target through his scope. "I see it. Range is about 600 meters. I can take the shot, but I'll need to expose myself to get the angle." Rodriguez weighed the risks. If Park took the shot and missed, or if there were more enemy fighters protecting the mortar position than they could see, Park could be walking into a death trap. But if the enemy got that mortar operational, they were all dead anyway. "Take the shot," Rodriguez decided. Park moved to the edge of the plateau, exposing himself to enemy fire to get a clear shot at the mortar position. He settled behind his rifle, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley, and Rodriguez saw through his scope as the enemy fighter operating the mortar spun and fell. But Park's position had been exposed, and enemy fighters immediately began concentrating fire on his location. Park rolled back behind cover, but Rodriguez could see that several insurgents were moving to flank their position, using the distraction of the mortar attack to advance under cover. The situation was becoming desperate again, and Rodriguez found himself once more depending on their mysterious guardian angel to help even the odds. As if on cue, the unknown sniper began picking off the flanking fighters one by one, each shot precisely placed and devastatingly effective. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that their survival depended entirely on the skill and dedication of someone they had never seen, someone who was risking his own life to keep them alive. The question that haunted him was simple. Who was this mysterious sniper, and what was he doing in these remote Afghan mountains? As the firefight continued and ammunition ran lower, Rodriguez knew they were living on borrowed time. The mysterious sniper was keeping them alive for now, but even the best marksman couldn't hold off an entire army of insurgents indefinitely. The radio crackled again with another transmission from Overwatch, but Rodriguez was beginning to suspect that whoever was on the other end of that radio might not be entirely trustworthy. Too many things about this mission hadn't added up from the beginning, and he was starting to wonder if they had been set up from the start. But those were questions for later, if there was a later. Right now, his focus had to remain on keeping his team alive until they could figure out their next move. In the distance, he could hear the sound of helicopters approaching, but he couldn't tell if they were friend or foe in the maze of mountains and conflicting radio calls. The battle was far from over, and Rodriguez suspected the hardest part was still to come. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, but Rodriguez couldn't shake his growing suspicion about the entire situation. The intelligence had been wrong. The communications had been jammed from the beginning, and now mysterious aircraft were approaching while an unknown sniper provided cover for his team. Nothing about this mission was adding up the way it should. Thompson was monitoring multiple radio frequencies, trying to identify the incoming aircraft. "I'm picking up radio chatter, but it's not on our standard frequencies," he reported. "Could be coalition forces, could be something else entirely." Rodriguez made a decision that went against his training, but felt right in his gut. Instead of trusting the official radio communications, he was going to rely on his own tactical judgment and the mysterious sniper who had kept them alive so far. "Everyone maintain defensive positions," he ordered. "We don't move until we know for certain who those helicopters belong to." Park had been studying the approaching aircraft through his scope. 2 helicopters, military configuration. They're circling the valley instead of coming straight to our position. That's not standard extraction protocol. Rodriguez felt his suspicions solidify into certainty. An extraction flight would come straight to their position, not circle the area like they were conducting reconnaissance. These helicopters were looking for something, and Rodriguez wasn't sure his team was what they wanted to find. The radio crackled again with the voice of Overwatch. "Bravo 6, we have extraction helicopters in your area. Pop smoke to identify your position for pickup." Rodriguez hesitated. Popping smoke would reveal their exact location to everyone in the area, including any hostile forces. It was standard extraction procedure, but everything about this situation was non-standard. "Overwatch, request confirmation of extraction aircraft identification codes," Rodriguez replied. There was a longer pause than usual before the response came. "Bravo 6, that information is classified. Pop smoke for immediate extraction." Rodriguez exchanged glances with his team members. In all his years of special operations, extraction aircraft identification had never been classified information for the teams being extracted. Something was very wrong with this entire operation. That's when the mysterious sniper made another intervention that changed everything. A single shot echoed across the valley, but this time it wasn't aimed at the insurgent fighters. Rodriguez watched through his scope as one of the circling helicopters suddenly began trailing smoke and auto-rotating toward an emergency landing. "What the hell?" Thompson said. staring at the damaged aircraft. Did our sniper just shoot down a helicopter? Rodriguez was trying to process what he had just witnessed when his radio came alive with frantic transmissions on multiple frequencies. The communications weren't coming from Overwatch anymore, but from what sounded like legitimate military units responding to an aircraft in distress. Mayday, Mayday, this is Falcon 27. We're going down in Grid 77 Alpha. Took sniper fire from unknown position. Say again, we are going down. Thompson was rapidly switching between frequencies, picking up multiple transmissions. I'm hearing response calls from legitimate coalition call signs, he reported. Sounds like that helicopter wasn't one of ours. Rodriguez felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. The bad intelligence, the communication jamming, the mysterious helicopters. His team had been led into a trap, but not by the Taliban fighters they had been fighting. Someone else entirely had orchestrated this operation. The second helicopter was now taking evasive action, flying erratic patterns to avoid additional sniper fire. Rodriguez could see through his scope that it was trying to reach the location where the first helicopter had crashed. If there were survivors from that aircraft, the situation was about to become much more complicated. Movement in the valley, Park reported. Looks like some of those insurgent fighters are heading toward the crash site. Rodriguez realized they were witnessing a three-way battle developing. His SEAL team was caught in the middle between insurgent fighters, mysterious helicopters that someone had identified as hostile, and an unknown sniper who seemed to be protecting them from threats they couldn't even identify. The radio crackled with a new voice, different from the Overwatch controller they had been talking to earlier. Any station, this is Razor Base. We show friendly forces in Grid 76 Bravo. If you are receiving this transmission, identify yourself immediately. Thompson looked at Rodriguez for permission to respond. This radio call sounded legitimate, using proper military protocol and call signs that could be verified. Rodriguez nodded. Razor Base, this is Bravo 6. 8-man SEAL team conducting operations in your area. We are pinned down by hostile forces and have been receiving fire support from unknown friendly sniper. Bravo 6, this is Razor Base. Stand by for authentication. Rodriguez was familiar with authentication procedures. Legitimate military units would have codes that could verify their identity and his. It was a safeguard against enemy forces using captured radios or trying to deceive American forces. The authentication exchange went smoothly, confirming that Razor Base was a legitimate coalition command center. More importantly, they had no record of any official extraction operation in Rodriguez's area. Bravo 6, we show no authorized helicopter operations in your sector. The aircraft that was just shot down was not coalition. Repeat, not coalition. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. His team had almost been extracted by enemy forces disguised as friendly aircraft. If they had popped smoke and revealed their position, they would have been captured or killed by whoever was operating those helicopters. Razor Base, who is the sniper providing support? We have unknown friendly eliminating hostiles in our area. Bravo 6, we have no assets assigned to your sector. Unknown sniper is not one of ours. Rodriguez was beginning to realize that their mysterious guardian angel was operating completely independently, without support from any official military command. Someone was risking their life to protect his team, and Rodriguez had no idea who or why. The tactical situation was becoming clearer, but also more dangerous. The insurgent fighters were regrouping and moving toward both the SEAL team's position and the helicopter crash site. The second helicopter was still circling, apparently trying to rescue survivors from the crashed aircraft. And somewhere in the mountains above them, an unknown sniper was single-handedly engaging multiple targets to protect people he had never met. We need to make a decision, Chen said quietly. Stay here and hope for official extraction, or try to move toward friendly lines on our own. Rodriguez studied his map. The nearest confirmed friendly position was over 20 kilometers away, across terrain that would be extremely difficult to traverse with a wounded teammate and limited ammunition. But staying in their current position meant depending entirely on continued support from their mysterious protector. The decision was made for him when Park spotted movement that changed everything. Rodriguez, you need to see this, Park said, handing over his spotting scope. "Look at the crash site." Rodriguez peered through the scope and saw something that made his blood run cold. The crew from the crashed helicopter was moving around their aircraft, but they weren't wearing standard coalition flight suits. Instead, they appeared to be wearing civilian clothes with tactical gear that didn't match any military unit Rodriguez was familiar with. More disturbing, the crew was setting up what looked like sophisticated communication equipment near their crashed aircraft. These weren't military pilots waiting for rescue. They were conducting some kind of operation from the crash site. "Thompson, are you monitoring their communications?" Rodriguez asked. "Trying to, but they're using encrypted channels I can't break," Thompson replied. "Whatever they're doing, they don't want anyone listening in." Rodriguez was putting together a picture that terrified him. His team had been led into these mountains under false intelligence. Their communications had been jammed to isolate them, and enemy forces disguised as coalition aircraft had attempted to extract them. This wasn't a simple Taliban ambush. This was a sophisticated operation designed to capture or eliminate his SEAL team. The question that haunted him was why. What made his team valuable enough for someone to go through such an elaborate deception? They were good operators, but they weren't carrying classified materials or conducting operations that would justify this level of attention. That's when Rodriguez remembered something that had seemed insignificant during their mission briefing. Their target, the engineer, was supposed to be a Taliban bomb maker. But what if he wasn't Taliban at all? What if he was someone else entirely? Someone valuable enough that multiple parties were willing to fight over him. "Chun, do you remember anything unusual about our target intelligence?" Rodriguez asked. Chun thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, the photos we were shown looked more like a Westerner than a local Afghan. But the briefing officer said he was a foreign fighter who had joined the Taliban." Rodriguez felt more pieces of the puzzle falling into place. What if the engineer wasn't a Taliban bomb maker at all, but someone else entirely? Someone valuable enough that multiple intelligence agencies or military units were conducting operations to either capture or eliminate him. The mysterious sniper fired again, and Rodriguez saw another insurgent fighter drop near the crash site. Whoever was providing their cover fire was preventing the insurgents from reaching the crashed helicopter crew, but Rodriguez wasn't sure that was necessarily a good thing. Those helicopter crew members might be the same people who had tried to deceive his team. "Razor Base, this is Bravo 6, Rodriguez called on his radio. "We need immediate extraction and close air support. We have identified hostile aircraft in our area and unknown forces operating from crash site. Bravo 6, we are launching immediate response. Rotary wing assets will be in your area in 20 minutes. Can you hold your position?" Rodriguez looked around at his team. Morrison's shoulder wound was getting worse despite the field dressing, and all of them were running dangerously low on ammunition. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours if the enemy forces coordinated an assault on their position. "We'll hold," Rodriguez replied, knowing he didn't have any other choice. But as he settled back into his defensive position, Rodriguez caught sight of movement on the ridge above them. For just a moment, he thought he saw a figure in a ghillie suit moving between rock formations. Their mysterious sniper was repositioning, probably to get better angles on the developing threats in the valley below. Rodriguez wanted to try to make contact with their guardian angel, to coordinate their actions or at least identify who was risking his life to protect them. But any attempt at communication would also reveal the sniper's position to enemy forces monitoring radio traffic. Instead, Rodriguez had to trust that whoever was up there would continue to watch over his team. It was a strange feeling, depending on someone he had never seen and couldn't communicate with. But that unknown marksman had kept them alive so far, and Rodriguez had no choice but to hope that protection would continue. The sound of the circling helicopter was getting louder, and Rodriguez could see through his scope that the aircraft was finally moving toward the crash site. Whatever operation the crash crew was conducting, their extraction was apparently more important than maintaining their cover. But the insurgent fighters had the same idea, and they were converging on the crash site from multiple directions. The valley was about to become a very crowded and very dangerous place, with a SEAL team caught in the middle of a battle they didn't fully understand. Rodriguez checked his ammunition one more time and prepared his team for what he suspected would be the longest 20 minutes of their lives. In the distance, the mysterious sniper fired again, and Rodriguez whispered a prayer of gratitude to whoever was watching over them from the high country. The real battle was just beginning, and Rodriguez had the sinking feeling that his team was about to discover just how deep this conspiracy went. The valley erupted into chaos as three different forces converged on the helicopter crash site. Rodriguez watched through his scope as insurgent fighters advanced from the eastern approaches. The mysterious helicopter crew defended their position with surprisingly sophisticated weapons, and his own team remained trapped on the plateau above the action. The mysterious sniper continued to provide overwatch, but Rodriguez could tell that even their guardian angel was being stretched thin. Shots were coming less frequently now, and Rodriguez suspected the unknown marksman was conserving ammunition for the most critical targets. "Movement on our 6, Watson called out suddenly. "We've got company coming up behind us." Rodriguez spun around to see a group of insurgent fighters who had managed to work their way around behind their position while everyone's attention was focused on the valley below. They were less than 100 meters away and closing fast. "Defensive positions to the rear," Rodriguez ordered. "Park Chun, take the backside. Everyone else maintains coverage on the valley." The team split their fire between the advancing threats from behind and the ongoing battle in the valley. It was exactly the kind of situation Rodriguez had been trained to avoid, fighting in multiple directions with limited ammunition and no clear avenue of escape. Park's rifle cracked repeatedly as he engaged the fighters advancing from behind. Each shot was carefully placed, but Rodriguez could see that there were too many targets for one sniper to handle effectively. The enemy had apparently decided that eliminating the SEAL team was worth the cost in casualties. "I'm down to my last magazine," Park called out between shots. Rodriguez made a quick inventory of his team's remaining ammunition. They had enough for maybe 10 more minutes of sustained combat, assuming they didn't miss any shots. After that, they would be reduced to sidearms and hand-to-hand combat against superior numbers. That's when the unexpected happened. A new voice came over Rodriguez's radio, speaking in clear, unaccented English. "Bravo 6, this is Guardian. I've been providing overwatch for your team. Enemy forces are attempting to flank your position from the northeast. Recommend immediate displacement to grid 7-5 Charlie." Rodriguez felt a surge of excitement and confusion. Their mysterious sniper was finally making direct contact, but the recommended position was in the opposite direction for where friendly forces were supposed to be approaching. "Guardian, this is Bravo 6. Confirm your identity and authorization for this frequency." "Bravo 6, I'm operating under classified parameters. Trust me when I say your current position is about to become untenable. Move now." Rodriguez had to make a split-second decision based on incomplete information. He could follow official protocol and wait for the extraction helicopters that Razorbase had promised, or he could trust the voice of someone who had been keeping his team alive for the past hour. "Guardian, we have one wounded. Can you provide cover for our movement?" "Affirmative, Bravo 6. I'll suppress the northeastern approach. Move on my mark." Rodriguez gathered his team. Morrison was pale and weak from blood loss, but still functional. The movement Guardian was recommending would require crossing open ground under fire, but their current position was becoming impossible to defend. "Listen up," Rodriguez told his team. "We're moving to new coordinates provided by our overwatch. This goes against official extraction plans, but I trust the guy who's been keeping us alive." Thompson looked uncertain. "What about the extraction helicopters from Razorbase?" "We'll contact them from a new position," Rodriguez decided. "Right now, we need to move before we're overrun." Guardian's voice came over the radio again. "Bravo 6, mark ready in 30 seconds. I'll provide suppression fire on the northeastern approach, then you move immediately." Rodriguez positioned his team for the movement. They would bound across the open ground in two groups, with the first group providing cover for the second. It was a standard tactical movement, but executing it while under fire from multiple directions would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. "Mark!" Guardian's voice called out. A rapid series of shots rang out from the high ground above them, each one precisely targeted at the enemy fighters who had the best angles on the planned movement route. Rodriguez could see through his scope as insurgents who had been preparing to fire on his team suddenly dropped or scrambled for better cover. First group move, Rodriguez called out. Chun, Watson, and Thompson sprinted across the open ground while Park and Rodriguez provided covering fire. The mysterious Guardian continued his suppression fire, picking off any enemy fighter who tried to engage the moving SEALs. The first group made it safely to the new position, a rocky outcropping that provided better cover and improved fields of fire. Now it was time for the second group to move, including Morrison with his wounded shoulder. Guardian, can you cover our second movement? Rodriguez asked. Affirmative. Moving in 10 seconds. Rodriguez helped Morrison to his feet. The SEAL was obviously in pain and weakened from blood loss, but he was determined to make the movement under his own power. Park took Morrison's other side, and together they prepared for the dangerous sprint. Move! The second group bounded across the open ground as Guardian's rifle spoke repeatedly from the high ground. But this time, the enemy was ready for the movement. Heavy machine gun fire raked the ground around them, sending up sprays of dirt and rock fragments. Morrison stumbled halfway across, his wounded shoulder causing him to lose his balance. Park immediately stopped to help him up, exposing both men to concentrated enemy fire. Rodriguez saw muzzle flashes from multiple positions targeting his teammates. That's when Guardian demonstrated just how skilled he really was. A series of rapid, precision shots eliminated the machine gun crew that had been targeting Morrison and Park. Additional shots forced other enemy fighters to take cover just long enough for the two SEALs to complete their movement. Everyone accounted for, Rodriguez reported as they reached the new position. The new location was significantly better from a tactical standpoint. They had clear fields of fire in multiple directions, better cover from enemy observation, and, most importantly, they weren't trapped on the exposed plateau anymore. Guardian, this is Bravo 6. Thanks for the cover. What's your assessment of our situation? Bravo 6, you're in a better position now, but enemy forces are regrouping for a coordinated assault. I count approximately 30 fighters converging on your area. You need immediate extraction. Rodriguez contacted Razor Base to update their position, but the response was not what he expected. Bravo 6, we show you have moved away from designated extraction point. Return to original coordinates for pickup. Rodriguez looked around at the terrain between their current position and the original extraction point. It was nearly a kilometer of open ground that was now crawling with enemy fighters. Moving back would be suicide. Razor Base, original extraction point, is compromised. We need pickup at our current location. Negative Bravo 6. Extraction aircraft cannot land at your current coordinates. You must return to designated pickup zone. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that official channels were either incompetent or compromised. The extraction helicopters that were supposed to save them were demanding they move to a position where enemy forces could easily capture or eliminate them. Guardian, are you monitoring these radio transmissions? Rodriguez asked. Affirmative Bravo 6. I recommend you do not return to that extraction point. Intelligence suggests it may be compromised. Rodriguez made another decision that went against his training. Guardian, can you guide us to a safe extraction point? Bravo 6, I can get you to a position where legitimate friendly forces can pick you up, but it will require movement through hostile territory. Rodriguez looked at his team. Morrison was getting weaker, they were almost out of ammunition, and they were surrounded by enemy forces. But they also had support from someone who had demonstrated both the skill and commitment to keep them alive. Guardian, we're ready to move on your guidance. Roger, Bravo 6. I'm going to guide you through a series of positions that will get you to safety, but you'll need to trust my directions completely. There are elements in play here that are more complex than your original mission parameters. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that their simple capture mission had somehow put them in the middle of a much larger operation. Multiple intelligence agencies or military units were apparently conducting operations in this area, and his team had stumbled into something far beyond their intended scope. Guardian, can you tell us what we're really dealing with here? Negative on specifics over radio, Bravo 6. But the individual you were sent to capture is not who your intelligence briefing indicated. Multiple parties want him, and Your team was being used as a disposable asset to flush out other operations. Rodriguez felt anger building alongside his fear. His team had been deliberately placed in danger as part of some larger game between intelligence agencies. They were expendable pieces in someone else's operation. Guardian, who are you? Why are you helping us? There was a long pause before Guardian responded. Let's just say, I don't like seeing good soldiers used as pawns in games they don't understand. I'll get you home, Bravo 6, but we need to move soon. Enemy forces are coordinating for a major assault on your position. Rodriguez could see through his scope that Guardian was right. Insurgent fighters were moving into assault positions, apparently preparing for a coordinated attack. But, more disturbing, Rodriguez could also see what looked like the crew from the crashed helicopter moving toward his team's position with military precision. Guardian, we have movement from the crash site crew. Are they friendly or hostile? Hostile, Bravo 6. They're the ones who orchestrated this entire operation. If they capture your team, you'll disappear completely. Rodriguez felt his blood run cold. Not only were they surrounded by insurgent fighters, but the people who had tried to extract them earlier were now moving to capture them personally. His team was trapped in the middle of a complex operation with enemies on all sides. Guardian, we need to move now. Where do we go? Stand by, Bravo 6. I'm going to create a diversion that will draw enemy attention away from your position. When you see the fireworks start, move immediately toward Grid 74 Alpha. I'll guide you from there. Rodriguez prepared his team for another movement under fire. They were depending entirely on someone they had never seen, trusting their lives to a voice on the radio who claimed to be protecting them from enemies they couldn't even identify. But as Rodriguez checked his remaining ammunition one final time, he knew they didn't have any other choice. Guardian had kept them alive so far, and their mysterious protector was the only thing standing between his team and capture or death in the Afghan mountains. The sound of approaching aircraft was getting louder, but Rodriguez no longer trusted that they represented salvation. In this maze of competing operations and hidden agendas, he was beginning to realize that their only hope lay with the unknown guardian angel who was watching over them from the high country. The diversion Guardian promised began with a series of explosions in the valley below that sent debris and smoke high into the air. Rodriguez watched through his scope as what appeared to be carefully placed demolition charges destroyed the mysterious helicopter crew's communication equipment and scattered their operation. Now, Bravo 6, move to 74 Alpha. Guardian's voice commanded over the radio. Rodriguez led his team down from their rocky position, following a route that seemed impossible until they were actually moving through it. Guardian was directing them along paths that provided natural concealment from enemy observation, using terrain features that Rodriguez hadn't even noticed from their previous position. Morrison was struggling with the movement, but Chen had taken over supporting the wounded SEAL, allowing them to maintain pace with the rest of the team. Behind them, Rodriguez could hear shouts and gunfire as enemy forces responded to Guardian's diversionary explosions. Left 30 meters at the large boulder, Guardian's voice guided them. There's a natural depression that will provide concealment from the northeastern approach. The team moved like ghosts through the mountainous terrain, following Guardian's precise directions through landscape that would have been nearly impossible to navigate without guidance. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that their mysterious protector had been observing this area for much longer than just the few hours they had been in contact. Hold position, Guardian commanded as they reached a small ravine that provided excellent concealment. Enemy patrol, moving through your previous location. Wait for my signal. Rodriguez could hear voices speaking in Pashto somewhere above them, confirming that insurgent fighters were searching the area they had just vacated. The timing of their movement had been perfect, but Rodriguez knew they owed their success entirely to Guardian's overwatch and guidance. Thompson was monitoring multiple radio frequencies and picked up communications that made Rodriguez's blood run cold. I'm hearing radio traffic in English, Thompson whispered. Sounds like American voices coordinating a search pattern for our team. Rodriguez felt his worst fears confirmed. The people hunting his team weren't just insurgent fighters or foreign intelligence operatives. Americans were involved in whatever conspiracy had led them into these mountains. Guardian, we're picking up American radio traffic hunting for our team. How deep does this conspiracy go? Deeper than you want to know, Bravo 6. The individual you were sent to capture has information that several agencies want, and your team was expendable in their plans to obtain it. Keep moving toward the coordinates I'm providing. Rodriguez was beginning to piece together a picture that made him sick to his stomach. His team had been sent into these mountains under false pretenses, led into an ambush designed to either eliminate them or use them as bait to flush out other operations. They were pawns in a game being played by people who saw soldiers as disposable assets. Movement clear to the east, Guardian reported. Move another 100 meters toward the tree line. As they moved through the mountain terrain, Rodriguez caught glimpses of their mysterious protector. Guardian was clearly a highly trained operator, moving through positions with the kind of skill that came from years of special operations experience. But Rodriguez still couldn't get a clear view of the man who was saving their lives. The team reached a position where they had better concealment and could observe the broader tactical situation. Through a scope, Rodriguez could see that the valley below was crawling with different groups, all searching for his team. Insurgent fighters, the crew from the crashed helicopter, and now what appeared to be additional American personnel were all converging on the area. Guardian, how are we going to get out of here with all these different forces hunting us? Patience, Bravo 6. I have assets positioning for extraction, but timing is critical. We need to wait for the right moment. Rodriguez noticed that Guardian had said assets, implying that their mysterious protector wasn't working alone. Someone else was involved in this operation, someone with the resources to conduct extraction operations in hostile territory. 20 minutes later, Rodriguez heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching, but these aircraft sounded different from the ones that had been circling earlier. The engine note was different, and they were approaching from a direction that suggested they were coming from legitimate coalition bases. Guardian, are those our extraction aircraft? Affirmative, Bravo 6. But we need to move to a specific landing zone that I've coordinated with them. Follow my directions exactly. Rodriguez felt a surge of hope for the first time in hours. But he also felt deep suspicion about anyone claiming to offer salvation in this maze of competing operations and hidden agendas. Guardian, how do we know we can trust these helicopters? We've been deceived before. Because these aircraft are being flown by people who work for me, Bravo 6. You're going to have to trust me one more time. Rodriguez made a decision based on hours of evidence. Guardian had kept them alive when everyone else had either tried to kill them or use them. If their mysterious protector wanted them dead or captured, there had been plenty of opportunities to accomplish that goal. Lead the way, Guardian. The movement to the extraction point required crossing open ground that exposed them to observation from multiple enemy positions. But Guardian had apparently planned for this contingency. As soon as the SEAL team began moving, suppressive fire began raining down on every enemy position that had clear sight lines to their movement route. Rodriguez realized that Guardian wasn't working alone. Multiple snipers were providing overwatch, creating a corridor of protection that allowed his team to move safely through terrain that should have been a death trap. How many people are up there? Rodriguez asked over the radio. Enough, Guardian replied simply. The extraction helicopters were approaching fast, flying low through the mountain valleys to avoid detection. Rodriguez could see that they were legitimate military aircraft, not the suspicious helicopters that had tried to extract them earlier. Bravo 6, this is Rescue 1. A new voice called over the radio. We have your team in sight. Landing zone is secure for immediate pickup. Rodriguez could see the landing zone Guardian had directed them to. It was a small clearing that would barely accommodate one helicopter, but it was surrounded by high ground that provided excellent defensive positions for anyone providing overwatch. Move to the landing zone, Rodriguez ordered his team. Morrison, can you make it to the helicopter? Morrison nodded, though his face was gray with pain and exhaustion. Chun and Watson flanked him, ready to carry him if necessary. The helicopter flared for landing just as Rodriguez's team reached the clearing. The crew chief was waving them aboard, and Rodriguez could see that these were definitely coalition forces. But what struck him was that the aircraft bore no unit markings or identification that would indicate which organization was conducting this extraction. As his team boarded the helicopter, Rodriguez made one final radio call. Guardian, this is Bravo 6. We're boarding extraction aircraft. Will we see you again? Negative, Bravo 6. This is where our paths separate. But I want you to know that you and your team conducted yourselves with honor in an impossible situation. Take care of your wounded teammate. Rodriguez felt an overwhelming desire to thank the man who had saved their lives, but the helicopter was already lifting off. Through the aircraft's window, he caught a glimpse of movement on the high ridges above the landing zone. For just a moment, he thought he saw a figure in a ghillie suit watching their departure, but then the helicopter banked away and the mountains disappeared behind them. During the flight back to base, the crew chief handed Rodriguez a sealed envelope. "I was told to give this to you once we were airborne," he said. Rodriguez opened the envelope and found a single sheet of paper with a brief message. "The individual you were sent to capture is now in protective custody. The conspiracy that used your team as bait has been neutralized. Your mission report should reflect that you encountered heavy enemy resistance, but received support from Coalition Special Operations Forces. Do not mention specific details about Guardian or this extraction. Some secrets are worth keeping." The message was unsigned, but Rodriguez understood. His team had been rescued by people operating outside normal military channels, people who were fighting the same enemies but couldn't acknowledge their existence through official channels. When they landed at the Coalition base, Rodriguez and his team were debriefed by intelligence officers who seemed very interested in their account of events. Rodriguez followed the guidance in the unsigned message, reporting that they had received support from unidentified Coalition Special Operations Forces, but providing no specific details about Guardian or the mysterious snipers who had saved them. Morrison was immediately taken to the base medical facility, where surgeons successfully repaired his shoulder wound. The rest of the team spent 2 days being debriefed and writing reports that carefully omitted the most important details of their experience. 3 months later, Rodriguez received a letter through unofficial channels. It contained no return address and had been delivered through a network that specialized in maintaining communications between special operations veterans. The letter was brief. "Your teammate Morrison has made a full recovery. The conspiracy that targeted your team has been completely dismantled. 3 intelligence officers and 2 contractors have been arrested for conspiracy and treason. The engineer is providing valuable intelligence about foreign operations targeting American Special Operations Forces. Your team's sacrifice and courage made all of this possible. Guardian." Rodriguez never learned Guardian's real name or which organization he worked for, but sometimes late at night when he was lying awake thinking about close calls and narrow escapes, Rodriguez would remember the voice on the radio that had guided them through their darkest hour. He never forgot the lesson he learned in those Afghan mountains, that sometimes the most important help comes from unexpected sources, and that in the shadow world of special operations, Guardian angels often work alone, protecting people they've never met from enemies they can't identify. The official mission report listed the operation as a qualified success. The target had been neutralized, intelligence had been gathered, and all team members had returned safely despite encountering unexpected enemy resistance. But Rodriguez knew the real story would remain classified forever, known only to the 8 men who had lived through it, and the mysterious Guardian who had watched over them from the high country. Years later, when Rodriguez had retired from the SEALs and was working as a trainer for new Special Operations Forces, he would sometimes tell his students about the importance of supporting each other in the field. He never told them the specific story of Guardian, but he always emphasized that help could come from unexpected sources and that the bonds forged in combat extended far beyond official unit assignments. And sometimes when his students asked him about the most important lesson he had learned in his years as a SEAL, Rodriguez would think about that voice on the radio in the Afghan mountains and say simply, "Someone is always watching over you, even when you can't see them. Your job is to be worthy of that protection." In the end, that was the real lesson of their encounter with Guardian. Not all heroes wear uniforms or receive recognition for their sacrifices. Some of them operate in the shadows, protecting others without seeking credit or acknowledgement, motivated only by the simple belief that good soldiers deserve to come home alive. Rodriguez never forgot the debt he owed to the mysterious sniper who had appeared when hope seemed lost. And he never stopped being grateful for the reminder that in a world full of darkness and deception, there were still people willing to risk everything to protect others, asking nothing in return except the knowledge that they had done the right thing when it mattered most.